Hey everybody, it's Miss Camp again, here for the third set of rhetorical devices. We'll do numbers 21 through 30 this week, and you'll have a test on Thursday, October 8th. We're going to do some more syntax study this week. Okay, 21 is juxtaposition. And juxtaposition means the placement of two things side by side for emphasis, especially to show their differences. For instance, Sherman Alexie does a good bit of juxtaposition in his essay Superman and Me. He juxtaposes his experience as a student in a reservation school to the Native Americans in reservation school now. He also juxtaposes how Indians behave inside school and how they behave outside of school. And he juxtaposes two types of modern Indian students at the end as well. The ones who listen and are anxious to learn, and the ones who've already grown cold to instruction. 22 is parallel structure, or also known as parallelism. Parallel structure is the repetition of similar grammatical or syntactical patterns. It can be within a single sentence, within a paragraph, or within the entire text. Sherman Alexie uses parallel structure too, a good bit. And here's one example. I read the books I borrowed from the library. I read the backs of cereal boxes. I read the newspaper. I read the bulletins posted on the walls of the school, the clinic, the tribal offices, the post office. I read junk mail. It's parallel structure because he begins each sentence with I read, and the sentences are formed the exact same way. Subject, verb, what type of book he read. I read what types of books he read. So each sentence is structured the same way. That's parallel structure. It's also parallel structure the way he continually goes back to the idea of saving lives. Sometimes he says, I was trying to save my life. Sometimes he says, I was trying to save their lives. And sometimes he says, we were trying to save our lives. But either way, it's a parallel structure because it occurs at specific intervals in the essay. Number 23 is antithesis. I know it looks like antithesis, but we pronounce it as antithesis. An antithesis is a parallel structure that juxtaposes contrasting ideas. So when you have parallel structure and you add juxtaposition, we call it antithesis. And here's Sherman Alexie again. Here's where he's juxtaposing what Indians do inside of school and what they do outside of school. But because he writes it in the same grammatical structure, it's called antithesis. They struggle with basic reading in school, but could remember to sing a few dozen powwow songs. They were monosyllabic in front of their non-Indian teachers, but they could tell complicated stories and jokes at the dinner table. They submissively ducked their heads when confronted by a non-Indian adult, but would slug it out with the Indian bully who was 10 years older. Each sentence begins with they and then a verb. And then the second phrase, because these are simple sentences, but could do this, but could do something else, but could do something else. So you have parallel structure because each sentence is constructed in exactly the same way, and it's used to contrast the Indians inside of school versus the Indians outside of school. So that is called antithesis. Number 24 is anaphora, and it's repetition of words at the beginning of successive clauses. Anaphora is a very specific type of parallel structure. The example we gave for parallel structure for Sherman Alexie here, this is anaphora as well because each sentence starts with I read. Here's another example of anaphora from Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. Each sentence begins the same way, therefore it is anaphora. Number 25 is appositive. We've talked about this a little bit, but an appositive is a word or phrase that renames a nearby noun or pronoun. It's usually marked off by commas, and it usually comes right after the noun it renames. For instance, my sister, the blonde girl, is quite lazy. The blonde girl is your appositive. It's that inserted phrase. It's not necessary to the sentence because the sentence is my sister is quite lazy. This just gives some more detail about the noun sister. The Dodgers, my favorite baseball team, is going to do well this year. My favorite baseball team is your appositive phrase. It renames the Dodgers, but it's not necessary to the sentence because the sentence is the Dodgers. Well, actually, that should be are going to do well. Oops, subject verb agreement error there. The next one, did you bring the right tools? The flathead screwdriver and a hammer. The flathead screwdriver and a hammer is the appositive phrase. It renames tools. Not necessary to the sentence, it's added on extra. So, did you bring the right tools is your main sentence. Here is your positive phrase. Inversion 26 is also known as inverted syntax, a sentence in which the verb precedes the subject. A sentence not arranged in traditional American English syntax. Normally we do subject, verb, object in American English. When you flip that around, if you do verb, object, subject, verb, subject, verb, then you're doing inverted syntax. Here's a sentence with traditional word order. I bought a beautiful purse. Subject, I. Verb, bought. Direct object, a beautiful purse. If I flip that around, I have inverted syntax. A beautiful purse I bought. A beautiful purse bought I. Means the same thing, but it has a different reading, rhythm, and has a different emphasis. Oftentimes, inversion is used for poetic language or to create a particular rhythm or to put emphasis on a particular word. 27 is polysyndeton. Now we know that poly means many. So polysyndeton is the deliberate use of a series of conjunctions. Lots of conjunctions in one sentence. For instance, using and or so over and over and over again. This is an example from The Great Gatsby. While we admired, he brought more, and the soft, rich heap mounted higher. Shirts with stripes and scrolls and plaids and coral and apple green and lavender and faint orange with monograms of Indian blue. The idea of polysyndeton is to create that rolling list, and on top of and on top of and, so that you feel like things are being piled on just as they are in the sentence. Now the opposite of that is asyndeton. A means not or without when you add it to a word. So asyndeton is deliberately leaving out conjunctions between words, phrases, or clauses. For example, from the Gettysburg Address, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. We don't put any conjunctions here, so that's asyndeton, without conjunctions. And our last two, number 29, cataloging. We've already mentioned this. It's listing as a rhetorical device. And what you do is you overwhelm the reader with a montage of images, like a video montage. Like when you're watching a movie and they're showing everything that happens within a few days, and they've got music playing in the background, they just show you a series of images. That's what cataloging does in written language. Here's an example from Sherman Alexie again. My father was an avid reader of westerns, spy thrillers, murder mysteries, gangster epics, basketball player biographies, and anything else he could find. Now, Alexie could have written, my father was an avid reader of lots of types of books, but that's vague. This is far more specific, and when we're reading off the list of types of books his father reads, it's almost as if we are looking at the bookshelf and can see each different type of book, and that's what makes it effective. Number 30 is zeugma, and that's a construction in which one word, usually a verb, modifies or governs, often in different, sometimes incongruent ways, two or more words in a sentence. So usually the way zeugma works is there's a verb, and then the direct object of the verb lists three or four very different items you wouldn't normally put together. Here's an example from Sherman Alexie. We lived on a combination of irregular paychecks, hope, fear, and government surplus food. They literally lived off the food. You have hope and fear as abstract concepts of what was part of their life. And then irregular paychecks is a concrete image, but they didn't actually literally live off those. They had to manage their money off those, but it's a nice metaphor. And so we've got four very different ideas put together as if they were equal in this list. Same thing here from The Great Gatsby. There was music from my neighbor's house through the summer nights. In his blue garden, men and girls came and went like moths among the whisperings and the champagne and the stars. Now this zeugma here, whisperings and champagne and the stars, comes as the object of the preposition among, and they're three very different items: whisperings, champagne, and stars. One of them is a sound, the other is champagne that we drink, and then stars in the sky. But when they're listed like this equally, and they all fall as the direct object of this preposition, then they're put together as equals, even though they're very different. That's what we call a zeugma. And zeugmas are nice to use to create images, and at the same time create a feeling with them. You see a series of very different items put together as if they're equal, and then we get a more complete picture of the night because we have this mixed sensory imagery. Okay, there are your 10 for this week. The last ones of these are still very much syntax ideas. They will be added on to your other syntax words, and we'll have a quiz on these next Thursday. Hope you enjoy.